Here's what I was doing. The problem with a melody in the left hand is what? What's the biggest issue you're going to have?
Trying to voice the chords in a way that it doesn't like go too high because you're trying to.
Yeah, and also, how are you going to account for that bass note? Right? Where's the bass note? Because if the left hand's playing melody, you're not hearing the harmony. Well, one of the reasons this style is going to work well for you, because you can reach a tenth. So watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to play the bass note down here, right? So my left hand has got two jobs. It's got the job of playing the bass note, and it's got a part-time job or full-time job of playing the melody. So let's get the left hand first, and then we're going to add in different sounds in the right hand. But if you can get the left, you'll have a week's worth of work. Ah, he did it. You got it. Excellent. Okay, that's another week, all right? Why don't composers use that range of the piano? It's just such an amazingly resonant range. Okay, so now, what are we going to do with the right hand? I'll tell you what, I'm going to play the left hand part, and I want you just to experiment and try. Okay, so I'll let you use the pedal. How's that? Let's try it again. Okay, your ear is excellent, and you were coming up with nice counter melodies. So now, I'm going to challenge you, because are you doing any classical literature right now?
Yeah, I study jazz and classical both.
Excellent. Have you ever done pieces with arpeggios? Okay, slide over. I'm going to challenge you.
It's not the best, but like,
What's not the best?
my arpeggio technique is not the world.
Well, then perfect, right? The only way to get better at something is to do it. So Daniel, I'm doing you a huge favor here. Okay, here's what I'm going to suggest. Those voicings you came up with were excellent, but how about moving between different octaves like this? So. You see how I'm just floating around? Okay, I've practiced and listened in my life, but let's start easier. How about just 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, like eighth notes? Because I was thinking I was doing 64th notes. But if we start with something like that. Okay, so I'm going to play the left hand, and I want you just to try that. So notice how, as I'm teaching, I'm not asking to do too many things at once. So I'm often providing the accompaniment for them. Are you ready? I was blocking my who?
You're blocking the camera.
Oh, I'm blocking the camera again. Okay, all right, thank you. Well, I'll tell you something. I have about 10 minutes to wrap it all up. And Daniel, you have been amazing. And Katie, too. Thank you so much. Okay. Oh, fantastic. Full set of chord play? Fantastic. This is 5 books that each of you have earned. And what a thoughtful gift. Thank you very much. Okay. All right. that is my publisher. And Katie, for you, look into book 2, because that's all about playing inversions with your right hand and accompaniment style. Daniel, for you, it's book 5. It's all about different voicings, the 9th, 11th, and 13th chords. It's more appropriate for what you're doing. So, okay. Now, some of you might be thinking, I can't do that. But you know, yeah, I've been doing this for 30 years. But I'm hoping everything you just saw there was basically those 3 techniques. I'd like to conclude the last 10 minutes or so by explaining how you can start teaching arranging to raw beginners. I mean, people who walk in your door off the street that you've never seen before, how can they begin learning this art? Well, the art of arranging begins with playing a tune. And any person in their beginning lesson, you don't have to learn to read first to play a tune. So when I have beginners come into my studio, we play a treasure hunt game. And here's what I'll do. I'll teach them the names of the notes, and then I'll say, okay, did you know that every song you ever heard can be played starting on any note of the piano, except maybe the highest or the very lowest notes? And they go, really? I mean, this is news to a lot of people. They don't know about well-tempered system. A lot of people intuitively think, well, there's a certain note you must start on. So I say, sure, let's take Happy Birthday. Play a note. So they'll play that note, and I'll show off a little bit by playing it on that note, and then they'll say, okay, what about that note? And I'll hit. Some students will play, 20 notes for you. They just can't believe that any note will work. And so you bring them into the magic of the well-tempered system, and then you say, well, you can do this. You can learn to play tunes like this. So what I'll do is I'll take a book, and I bought a special watch that allows me to, see, look at this. And my publisher made the books a little small, so I asked them to reprint it so it would cover my hand completely. Thank you, Elaine. You see, look at that. And that way, it's a total auditory thing for the student, so that when I am introducing a tune to them, they're not doing it by rote. There's times to teach by rote, but not when you're trying to develop the ear. So I'll say to a student, let's learn Happy Birthday. I'm gonna encourage you to find it. And this is actually quite empowering to students, because the way we normally teach a student is we put a score in front of them and we teach them subconsciously that making music is a matter of decoding somebody else's instructions to make music. But this approach says to them, you have the ability to discern. You have the ability to find this tune within yourself. So it's a very different approach that builds confident players. My students who play by ear have much less performance anxiety. And I couldn't help but notice that after I finally learned to play by ear when I was about 30, about 4 years later, I gave my first recital where I had not any nerves. Was it a coincidence? I don't think so. I think I finally had some ears to rely on. So here's what I'll do. I'll say to the student, I'm going to start on G. Can you do this? And so I teach them in phrases. So students right from the beginning are not hearing note by note. They're hearing pitches in terms of a phrase. And then they'll come up and they'll do something like this. Happy birthday. And I'll think, uh-oh. So at this point, I need to start helping them develop auditory discernment. I'll say to them, okay, which is it? Is it what I did? And is what you played, which is this, is it the same? Now at this point, you say a quiet little prayer, because the next 6 months of your life are going to be heavily conditioned by whether you hear yes or no. And if the student says, oh no, there's a difference there, you breathe a sigh of relief because you have a lot less work to do. But if the student can't hear the difference, I've come to think, why am I teaching this student to read yet? If they have such poor auditory discernment, shouldn't I be focusing on that? And playing tunes by ear is a fantastic way to develop auditory discernment. So what I'll do with that student is I'll start playing a game I call easy choices. I'll say, okay, is it this door A? Or is it this? Now, every student I've ever taught can discern the difference between that and that. And then you just make the choices a little less obvious. Okay, is it this? Happy birthday. Or is it happy birthday? And the students say, oh, it's the second one. So you're developing their confidence in their ability to listen and discern. So it might take 10 minutes to learn the 25 tones of this piece. But by the end, the student's playing all 4 phrases by ear or by memory. And that's how I teach a lot of beginners the art of arranging, because the art of arranging always starts with a melody. Now, some of you have heard this before, but I can't say it enough. You think that because I can improvise, I can play by ear. No, I could improvise pretty darn well when I was in my late 20s. I was a professional piano player already, but I went and studied jazz for the first time when I was 28. And my jazz teacher, when he found out I was classically trained, he said, okay, well, let's see if you have any ears. He said, you classical cats don't have ears generally. What do you mean? You know. So he said, can you play Happy Birthday for me in the key of A? Now, I related the story this morning, but I never get tired of telling it. And I sat down and I started on the tonic. And it's like, and I was struggling. And out of the corner of my eye, I see this guy. And he's just rolling his eyes, like biting his lower lip, kind of like making a deal with the devil. Like, okay, the guy's going to pay me $50 an hour. I've just got to be patient. I've got to be patient. The poor guy, he comes from an oral tradition. The very hallmark of a musician is that you can play a tune by ear, right? He wasn't classically trained. This man was phenomenal. You could say any tune, and he could play at any key instantly. I can't do that. I can't begin to do that. So I was so humiliated that I decided from then on, I'm going to work with my students teaching by ear. Now, this is such a common condition in our tradition that I've coined a term for it, because many teachers have come up afterwards and said to me, Forrest, the same thing happened to me. One time I went to a student's birthday party, and they asked me to play Happy Birthday, and I couldn't do it without the music. So I've coined a term. It's HBPHD. It stands for Happy Birthday Public Humiliation Disorder. Now, I made a promise to myself that I'll never let my students willingly experience HBPHD in their life. And I'm encouraging you to do that. So if you teach your students a small repertoire of tunes by ear, and then help them learn to play it in different keys with different hands, and then add single bass notes by ear, again playing a similar ear game where you say, is it this bass note or that bass note? In a few months, maybe even 4 or 5 months, a student will have a repertoire of 5 or 6 pieces. Now, this isn't so outlandish, because some of you may have heard of Clara Schumann. Is that a familiar name? Yeah. Okay. I think she's the second most influential pianist of the 19th century after Franz Liszt. I mean, she shaped our entire tradition. The more you learn about her, she's an amazing person. Her father taught her this way for the first 10 months. At the age of 5, he taught her to play by ear and transpose and add simple chords. And then he taught her treble clef after 10 months, and then he taught her bass clef 2 months later. So he believed very much in the auditory training as a foundation. And then the student eventually learns to add chords, and then they're ready for the art of arranging. They're ready to start styling those chords, to add colors and that sort of thing. So I always say that the art of arranging can begin in the very first lesson, even though they might not be able to read or play chords because of their hands. So I know that I only have a minute or 2 left. I wanted to see if anybody had a quick question of general interest for the whole audience. Any objections, complaints, criticisms? None? Okay. Well, then what I'll do is I'll simply say this. I will be around tomorrow down in the exhibit hall at the Frederick Harris booth. If you have questions for me, I'd love to answer questions. I'm all about trying to give teachers tools to enable them to teach these lost arts. And the art of arranging, as I say, is the most practical and useful art. So I want to not only conclude by saying thank you for coming, but I want to give one more round of applause for Daniel and Katie. Thank you very much.